collaboration with Wendell at Level 1 Techs and a few unnamed engineers that were a condition of anonymity for obvious reasons, did an amazing piece on this, and I think there's gonna be another part to it. The first part is 40 minutes long, where they really drill down into the root cause of the problems, which, to be honest, is like 6 different problems that are shared shared responsibility between the motherboard manufacturers and AMD itself. I highly recommend you go and watch that video. It's getting a lot of traction, and it's important because these manufacturers have to be held accountable. And once again, who is at the top of like the issue? So if you draw a chart, and Steve loves charts, there's plenty of charts in that video. Go, if you're a chart fanatic and a chart enthusiast, then go and watch Steve's video, because there's no shortage of charts ever in his videos. But anyway, who do you think also shared the most blame in it? ASUS, unfortunately. So this kind of brings me into today's topic, which is just the state of affairs that we are currently in with computers and how just fed up I am. You know, I talked about on my AM5 platform, which I built for my system at home, which is running a 7950X 3D. I'm all worried now. I'm like, okay, regarding the SoC voltage stuff, I should go in there and maybe double check some stuff to see what it's actually running at, because they were finding software reported versus actual with probing is also very inaccurate and overcooking CPUs. It has me honestly feeling like I made a mistake by going with AMD. AM5 was a huge undertaking for AMD, because you've got multiple CPU platforms being supported on the same chipset, of course AM5 socket, and then the newest chipset, which is X670 or the X670E, whatever, it's the same chipset. So it's just becoming kind of convoluted, where the motherboard manufacturers are making mistakes with their BIOS that are actually causing physical damage and failure on AMD CPUs, but AMD wasn't involved enough with the manufacturing of the motherboard BIOSes to make sure that everything was correct. They sort of were just like, here's some guides, and then the motherboard manufacturers didn't follow those guides, and you get what you have now, basically in a nutshell. And then just straight up failing checks and balances / fail safes into the motherboards that are just not working at all, because they weren't programmed to work properly. It's kind of the most important part. But I digress, I'm backing up here. These issues coming out about AM5, the 7950X 3D only having a single CCD with 3D V cache, which we didn't know until the review, and that kind of led to me going, well, now I have to make a choice. Do I want the most compute power with the 7950X, or do I want the most gaming power with the 7950X 3D? And then I have to make this trade-off, and it's just gross. Graphics card side of things, pricing is just absolutely out of control. NVIDIA is completely disconnected from reality on what people can afford to pay versus only catering to those.
Some exclusive tutorials as well. So when you're doing animation, you need to add keyframes, and those keyframes are going to tell Blender what is going to be animated and where it's going to be animated. So you're going to be adding keyframes at different time points in Blender. So right down here under Blender's 3D viewport, we have this right here, and this is the timeline. And so in the timeline, you're going to be adding different keyframes, and you're going to be adding those keyframes to bones or objects or values. And then you'll move to a further place in time in the timeline, and then you'll add another keyframe, and so that's going to tell Blender to go from one keyframe to the next keyframe. So let's start by adding some basic keyframes. Now I need to delete the default cube because that's what we always do. So I'm just going to double tap the A key and we'll press X to delete, and I'm going to delete everything. So I'll now press Shift A, and I'm going to be adding a cube because you can't use the default cube. You have to always add a new one. All right, so let's just do some very basic animation to this cube. So I'm going to select the cube, and then I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to scrub this blue line here on the timeline, and I'm going to bring it all the way back to frame 1 so we can start doing the animation. All right, so we are now at frame 1 and the cube is right here, and so I want to add a keyframe to tell it that that's where the cube is going to start. So to add keyframes, you are going to press the I button. So make sure your mouse is hovered in the 3D space, and then press I, and I is the shortcut key to inset a keyframe. Now you do have a bunch of different options here, and so this is asking you what values you want to add keyframes onto. And when you're animating objects in the 3D space, there are 3 main values that you're going to use. the location, the rotation, and the scale. So if you press G to grab, that is going to change the location. If you press R to rotate, that'll change the rotation. And then if you press S, that is going to change the scale. So when you press I, it's going to ask you what values you want to add keyframes onto. Now if you want to add a keyframe that's going to affect all three of those values, you can just click on this one right here, which is location, rotation, and scale. So after you press the I key, you can just click on any of these ones. I'm going to do the location, rotation, and scale. Now when I do that, you can see that right down here on the timeline, we have this little yellow diamond. And so that is Blender telling us that we have a keyframe on that part of the timeline. And also, if you press the A key to deselect the cube, you can see that now the diamond is gone. And so in the timeline, you're only going to be able to see the keyframes with the object that's selected. So if I now select this object again, then there is the diamond. And also in the timeline, if you press the A key, just like selecting and deselecting objects, if you press A in the timeline, that is going to select and deselect the keyframes. So we have now inserted a keyframe right here. So I'm just going to move over to frame 100. So you can just scrub with the timeline, just click and drag and move over to frame 100. And I now just want to transform the cube. So I can just press G to grab, and I'll also rotate it. So I'll press R to rotate it. And if you wanted to, you could also press S to scale and just scale that up. Now, if we move our timeline, or if we play the timeline, it's not going to keep this, and that's because we haven't added a keyframe on this value. So if I move this, you can see it's going to hop back to the original value. So I just need to do this again. So I'm going to bring it over, I'll rotate it, and then I'll also scale it. So we now need to add a keyframe right here to tell Blender that that's where we want the next keyframe to be on frame 100. So again, I'm going to press I, and I'm going to click on location, rotation, and scale. So now that I've done that, if I scrub through the timeline, you can see it's going from the first keyframe to the second keyframe. Now I'm just going to press Control Z to undo that, and if I press I again to add a keyframe, this time I could just click on rotation, and you can see now that I did that, it's moving the location, but because I didn't add this keyframe for the rotation and the scale as well, it's only going to add a keyframe to the location, and so the rotation and scale aren't going to be changed. Now to be able to visualize this a little bit better, if I press the N key, that is going to open up this side panel, and I'm going to go right down here to Item. And you can see right here on Item, we now have this Transform tab right here. So this is showing us the transform values for this object. So as I talked about earlier, we have three different transform values. We have the location, and that is going to be moving it around. We have the rotation to rotate it, and then we have the scale to scale it up or down. And each of these transform values have three values within them because we have the X and the Y and the Z axes. So those are all the axes in the 3D space. So I'm just going to press Control Z to undo that a few times, and then I now want to add a keyframe, but this one I want to affect the location, rotation, and scale. So I'll press I again, and then I'm going to click on location, rotation, and scale. And now it's done it for all the values. So now if I click and drag to scrub the timeline, you can see it is rotating and scaling the cube as well. Now you may have noticed something, and that is that these values right here have different colors. So if there are no keyframes on these values, they're just going to be the default gray. So you can see all these different values here in Blender, they're just normally the default gray color. If there is animation on those values, then they are going to be green. So green is basically telling you that there is animation on that value, but there isn't a keyframe on that exact frame. If I move over to frame 100 where there is a keyframe, they're going to turn yellow, and that is Blender telling you that there is a keyframe right at that part of time. So you can animate the cube in the 3D space, but you can also animate these values. So let's say I want to go over to maybe 150, and then I want to change the location and rotation. So what I can do is I can click and drag, and I can drag these values. So let's just move the cube over, and then also maybe I want to rotate the cube, so we're going to rotate that over. So now what I can do is I can just add keyframes to these values because these are the only ones that have changed. So to add keyframes to these values, I could press I and then insert a location and rotation and scale, or in this case, just a location and rotation because I didn't actually change the scale. But instead what I can do is I can just hover my mouse over the values, and then I can press I, and that is going to add a keyframe to these values. So I can hover my mouse over this value and press I, that is going to add a keyframe to the values. And I can also just right click, and I can right click on these values, and then you can see I can add a keyframe, or in this case I can replace the keyframe because I already have a keyframe at that value. And now if you scrub through the timeline, you can see that it moves up here, and then you have the other keyframes, and so the cubes moves over. And I will go over this later on in this tutorial, but you can animate pretty much any value in Blender. So just like we animated these, you can animate pretty much any value in Blender, all these different values in Blender, but I'll go over that in a moment. So I'm going to press the N key now to close that side panel. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about how to use the timeline. So if you just click and drag right up here on these numbers, then that is going to move the timeline around. Now, if you want to play the timeline, you can click on the play button right here, and that is going to play the timeline. And then you can see there is also a pause button, so you can click on that pause button to pause the timeline. And then there also is a play backwards, so you can click on that button, and that is going to play the animation backwards. And you may also see me just clicking and dragging right down here. That is because I'm using the right click select, so I can click and drag right down here. But for most of you who are using the left click select, you'll just click and drag right up here on these numbers. Now there also are some other buttons right here. So these buttons jump to the next keyframe. So if you click on that, it's going to jump to the next keyframe in the timeline. And you can also click on this button here, and that is going to jump back. Now these buttons right here on the very outer edges, those are going to jump to the start frame and the end frame. So if you click on this, you can see it's going to go to frame 1, and if I click on this, it's going to go to frame 250. So depending on how long your animation is, you can change the start and end frame. So for instance, I could just have my animation end at frame 160, but you can see the default is 250. So if I just click on this end value right here, I can just type in 160 and then hit enter, and you can see now the end frame is going to move to here. Now another thing you can change is the frame rate. So if you click right over here on the output properties, let me just make this a little bit bigger, you can change the frame rate. So the frame rate is basically telling Blender how many frames are going to be within 1 second. So the FPS, that stands for frames per second. Now the default is 24 frames per second, and for most things, 24 frames per second is going to be just fine for your animations. I am recording this video in 60 frames per second because I want it to be nice and smooth. I'm using OBS, my screen recording software, to record this, but for most animations and things, you're just going to use 24 frames per second. If you want it to be more smooth, you could turn it up. So for instance, I could turn it up to 60, and that's going to be a lot more smooth. So basically now if I play this, you can see it's much faster, but it's also much more smooth. So if I change this to 60 frames per second, there's now going to be 60 frames within every second. And you can see it's much more smooth now than 24 because there are more frames in every second. I'm just going to change this back to 24, which is the default. For most animations, usually animations are 24 frames per second. Now, if you've added some keyframes, but you want to edit those keyframes or change them, or maybe you want to change the timing, then you can do that. So let me first show you how to change the timing. So what you can actually do is you can actually just select the keyframe. You can press G to grab in the timeline, and that is going to move the keyframe. So if I wanted this to move up much quicker, I could press G to grab and then move over, and I could place it right here. And now if I play this, you can see it's going to move up much faster. And I can also just select this, press G to grab, and bring it over, and that way it's going to move much faster. And then if you have a keyframe selected, you can press X to delete, and then you can just click on delete keyframes. You can also press the delete key, and then that's going to delete the keyframe. So I'll just delete that, so X to delete, and now if I move through this, you can see that because we deleted that keyframe in the middle, it's just going to go from this keyframe to that keyframe. Now let's say that I want the cube to pause in this location, and I just want to pause for a little while, and then we'll have another keyframe and have it move over. So what I would want to do is I would want to duplicate this keyframe so that it stays right where it is and it doesn't move. So you can just select the keyframe, and then you can press Shift D, and so Shift D will duplicate the keyframe, just how Shift D will duplicate the object in the 3D space. You can press Shift D, and that's going to duplicate the selected keyframe. Now I'm just going to delete this keyframe real quick, and I want to show you another way that you could do this. So you could just simply move over to frame 90 or wherever you want to move it to, and then you could press the I key again, and you could insert location, rotation, and scale. And you can see now it's just going to stay where it is, and it's not going to move. Now you can see that in between these two keyframes there is a little line here, and if you press A to select the keyframes, you can see that that line is orange. So this line here in between these keyframes is basically telling you that the keyframe is exactly the same, and so nothing's going to change. Because I didn't move the object, I just moved over here and then added another keyframe, and so these two keyframes are exactly the same, and so you can see that the cube is not moving. So now I'm going to move over to maybe frame 110, and I'll press G to grab, R to rotate, and S to scale. Kind of bring that over there, and then again I'll press I to insert a keyframe, and we want to do location, rotation, and scale. So now you can see that the cube moves, and then it just kind of stays and it pauses, and then it moves over. Now maybe I don't like where this cube is, and so I want to override the keyframe. So I don't want to delete the keyframe, I just want to move it and then replace a keyframe. So basically overlap a keyframe on top of this and replace it. So how you do this is you just change this to whatever you want. So I'm just going to like rotate the cube, move it over, and then just make sure that the timeline is on that keyframe. So it's exactly on that keyframe. I can now press I, and then we're going to insert location, rotation, and scale. And that is going to override the keyframe, so now we just have a new keyframe and it's been replaced. And also the orange line isn't there because these keyframes are both different. Now this workflow of manually adding keyframes by pressing I is a little bit slow. And so there's actually a much faster way to animate in Blender. And that is by using this button right here, the auto key. So if you turn this button on, you can see now it's blue. And so when this is on, it's going to automatically add a keyframe whenever you transform an object. So let's just move over here. I'm just going to move over here, and then I can press R to rotate, just click to place that, and you can see that because the auto key was on, it automatically added a keyframe there. And I can also just edit this keyframe by maybe scaling it and moving it. And when you transform the object, you can see it's going to tell you that the auto keying is on. And so when I'm doing animation, I use this most of the time because it's much faster and it will just speed up your workflow quite a lot because you don't have to press I and then manually insert keyframes. Now I still use this some of the time if I want more manual control, and also I'll sometimes animate these values here if you press the N key, as I talked about earlier in this tutorial. But for most of my animation, I use the auto keying because I can just animate objects and it will automatically place a keyframe right there. Just make sure that you turn it off when you're done animating, because this still happens for me sometimes as well. I'll be animating with the auto key and then I'm finished animating, and so I'll start to go do some other stuff in Blender, kind of set up the scene, and then I'll realize that this entire time it was adding keyframes because the auto key was on. So just make sure you only turn this on right when you're going to start animating, and then once you're done, then just make sure you turn it off. Alright, so I've showed you the basics of animating objects in Blender, but there are so many other things you can animate in Blender, because as I talked about earlier in this tutorial, you can animate pretty much any value in Blender. So I'm just going to double tap the A key.
And here we see the Dota players in their natural habitat.
Prowling. Hell's fury, burn.
Dire structures are fortified.
Oh, hell yes. Oh, yes. Oh, hell yes. Yes. Onward. Yes. Verily.
Sound of
Prowling. Forward. You thought to tame the lion? Why not? To hell and back. Where's the fight?
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Money changes hands.
Key in the timeline to select all the keyframes, and then I will
Yes.
press X to delete, and I'm just going to delete the keyframes. I'm going to show you just a few different things that you can animate. So let's first go to the shader nodes. So I'm going to click right over here on the shading tab, and you can edit the shader nodes. So I'm now going to click on new here to add a new material, and let's just go into rendered mode. So I'll just press Z, move my mouse up to go into the rendered view. I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a magic texture. You don't have to follow along with this if you don't want to, or you can do whatever you want. I'm just going to add a magic texture. I'll also press Shift A, and I'm going to search here for an emission, and then I want to plug the emission up to the surface. and then I want to delete the principled, and then I'm going to take the color and put that into the color of the emission. So now you can see that we're previewing that magic texture. Now I want to be able to animate this, so I want to add a timeline down here. So I'm going to move my mouse right up here when the crosshair appears, and then I can click and drag down, and that is going to add a timeline. And then I'm also going to click right here when the crosshair appears here, click and drag out, and then let go, and that is going to bring that window out. Now right now it's the shader editor, so I want to click on this button right here, right next to my head, click on this button, and we're going to change this to the timeline. And so I'm going to start by going to frame 1, and then I want to add a keyframe on the scale value. So as I talked about earlier, you can right click and then just click on insert keyframe. That's going to insert a keyframe on that value, but you can also just hover your mouse over the value and press I, and that is going to insert a keyframe. So you can see right down here, we now have a keyframe on frame 1. Now you may notice something, and that is that there are 2 keyframes, and so this is Blender telling you that there is a keyframe on the cube, but there is also a keyframe on the material. So if you don't see this little thing right here, you can kind of click and drag to pull it out. It might be closed, and you can just click on the arrow and drag it out. And so this is basically going to tell you where there are keyframes on the different parts of the object. So we have one keyframe here because this is the keyframe on the cube, but then right down here it's going to tell you that there's a keyframe for the material, and it's also going to show you the shader right here on the node tree because we added that keyframe within the materials here. Real quick, I'm just going to hop back over to the layout. If I click and drag and open this up, you can see that it's right here as well. So if I press I, and we're going to insert a location, I can now move over here, press G to grab. We're just going to bring this over, and then I can press I again, and we're going to insert a location. So I've now added just a simple animation of the cube moving. If I open this up, you can see that it's going to tell you what is actually animated. So we have the cube, and then we have the cube transformed, and you can click on this little arrow to open this up, and it's going to show which values are animated. So that's why there are sometimes multiple keyframes to tell you where they're animated. So let's go back over here to the shading tab, and let's now animate this. So I'm going to just move this over. I'm going to move it over to frame 41, and then I'm going to change the scale. So I'm going to make the scale much smaller, so I'll make it really small. All right, so I've set the scale value to a much smaller value. So I'm now going to hover my mouse over the value, and I'll press I, and that is going to add a keyframe. And you can see that we have the material. So if I move this over, you can see here's the material. So here is the material values, and then here is the object. So if I select this and press G to grab, this is going to move around the object's location, and then if I click and select these ones and press G to grab, that is going to change the scale, because we have 2 different values of keyframes. We have the magic texture scale and also the location. So it's going to show the multiple sets of keyframes. Alright, so I can now just play through this, and you can see that the scale is actually changing, so that is super cool. So almost every value in Blender can be animated. Pretty much all these values can be animated. The strength value and all of that. I'm also going to animate the distortion, so I'm going to go back to frame 1, and I can hover my mouse over this and press I to insert a keyframe there, and then I can move over here. Let's actually move to frame 50, and then I can just turn the distortion up, and then I will hover my mouse over this and press I again to add a keyframe there. So if I now play through this, you can see that that distortion value is being animated. And what's really cool about Blender's animation is that it can also animate colors as well. So I can just unplug this color here. I can unplug the magic texture from the emission, and then let's just select the magic texture, and I'll just press X to delete it to make it a bit more simple. So I'm just going to move to frame 1, and then on the color here, I can just make this like a blue color. So I'm going to move it over there to a blue color. And now that I've set that to a blue color, I can just hover my mouse over the value and press I, and that is going to insert a keyframe on that color value. And you can see it has the yellow there because there is a keyframe right on that exact spot. So I can now just move over here, move to the end, and you can see there is a green outline, and the green is telling you that there are keyframes on this value, but it's not on this exact time in the timeline. So now I can just click on this, and I'll make it a red color, just like that, and then again just hover your mouse over the color value and press I, and that is going to insert a keyframe. So if I now play through this, you can see it's actually animating that value. So it starts out as blue, and then it kind of gets purple and pink, and then it goes to red. Alright, so that is how you animate other values in Blender. I'm just going to hop back over to the layout now. So the timeline does have a lot of options that you can use to edit your keyframes, but if you want even more control over your keyframes and your animation, then you're going to want to use the graph editor in Blender. So the graph editor is a new window in Blender, so we need to open it up. So to open it up, I'm going to move my mouse right over here when the crosshair appears, and then I'm going to click and drag and split the window, and now we can just change this to the graph editor. So I'm going to click right up here to change the window type, and under animation we're going to change it to the graph editor. So the graph editor is a really great way to have more control over your keyframes. So just like down here in the timeline where you can see all the different keyframes, you also have that view right up here in the graph editor. So I'm just going to close this one, and we can work with this one up here in the graph editor. So it's going to show you the cube, and this is this object, this cube object right here, and then it's going to show you some different things like the material, and you can see that there's the different color values because we animated the color, and then going to the render view, you can see we animated the color, so it's going to show the color values right there. And if I open up the cube action, you can see that we have the cube transformation. So if you click on the arrow to open it up, we now have the X location, the Y location, and the Z location, because I am animating this cube to move over. Now, if you want to change the size of the graph editor, you can hold down the control key and then click and hold with your mouse wheel. So just control key and then click with your mouse wheel and hold it down, and you can change the size of the graph editor. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, maybe just pull this out so we can see that a little bit better. Now, right up here on the graph editor, the top row right here, that is going to be the timeline. So it's basically going to show you all the frames. So we have all the frames up here, and going back and forth, that's going to change the time. Now, up and down, that is changing the actual values. So I'm just going to select these keyframes right here, and I'll press X to delete, and I want to delete the keyframes. So I'm now just going to move this over to a frame 100, and then I'm going to press G to grab, and let's bring this up on the Z axis. And I can also just like rotate this cube over, or rotate it over, and then I can press the I key to insert a keyframe, and I want to do the location, rotation, and scale. So now that I've done that, you can see that we have these keyframes down here, and then we also have these keyframes up here. So all of these little dots right here, those are all of the keyframes. Now, if you want to just edit a specific keyframe, like for instance, let's say I want to edit the location, I can just go right here, go over here to the side panel, and you can see that here is the Z location. So I can just click on that, and whenever you click on these values, it's going to highlight those keyframes. So I'm going to click on the Z location, and you can see that now it's highlighting that. So we have the first keyframe, which is right here, and then we have the second keyframe, which is right here, and you can also see those keyframes down here on the timeline. And so at frame 1, the cube starts down here, and then at
Radiant structures are fortified. Your top tower is under attack.
Spike!
Your top tower is under attack.
Forward. I'll take that. Yes.
Excuse me, sir, but it's your top tower. It says it's being destroyed. Dire structures are fortified.
Yes. Forward. Oh, hell yes. Yes. Verily. I feel like the devil.
Your top tower is under attack.
Prowling.
Your top tower has fallen. Bro, you even worse.
I'm under attack.
Excuse me, sir, but it's your top
Why
tower.
not?
It says it's being destroyed.
Mega kill.
To hell with you. To hell and back. Paid handsome. Feel my
The enemy's middle tower has fallen. Take that, you bounders!
Easier than shooting creeps.
verily. Invisibility. Why not?
As we move it up, you can see that the cube is moving up. So again, going back and forth is going to change where it is in time, and then up and down, that is going to actually change the value. So you can see it starts at 0, and then it goes up here to about 5. So what's really cool about the graph editor is you can just select keyframes and you can press G to grab and you can move those keyframes around. So if you want to speed up or slow down the animation, you can press G to grab, and then you can click and hold with your mouse wheel and constrain it to the axis going back and forth. And I can just change that, and now you can see that that line there is taking longer to come up. So if I now play this by pressing the space bar to play, you can see that now it's coming up much slower, or I can also move it back, and you can see that now the cube is coming up much quicker. Now every keyframe has these things right here, and these are handles. Now in the timeline you can't actually change the handles manually, and so that's why the graph editor is so useful, because you can click right here to change the handles. You can just click on these handles, and then you can press G to grab, and that is going to move the handle. Now the handles are going to change the shape of the animation. So you can see right here, if I just play this, you can see that the cube starts to speed up, and then as it gets towards the end, it starts to slow back down. But you can actually change the handles, and that is going to change the animation. So if I press G to grab and move this handle, you can see now it kind of gets faster, and then it kind of actually goes back down because I moved that up.
I'm under attack! Oh, hell yes.
The enemy's bottom tower has fallen.
Skill mid.
I go like the devil. Prowling. Oh, yes. Onward. Forward. After them! To hell and back. Yes.
Deepest thanks.
Why not? Strike! Verily. Yes.
The enemy's top tower has fallen.
Oh, yes. Prowling. Oh, hell yes.
Silence before my storm.
To hell and back. Feeling yourself.
Killing spree. Double kill.
Dire structures are fortified.
Oh no. Dominating, I guess. Oh no.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen. Dire structures are fortified. Their tower's bottom tower is under attack. Fortified!
Why not?
The enemy's middle barracks has fallen.
Back, bro.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Yes.
Just get back for now.
Forward. Yes. Mine. Selfish. I go like the devil. Oh, hell yes.
Killing spree.
Double damage. Oh, yes.
Killing spree. Mega kill.
Why not? Bloodbath. To hell and
Hell yeah! That top tower got boned. Oh, flipping Nora, we got their top racks. The enemy's top barracks has fallen.
verily. Why not? Oh, yes.
The enemy's bottom tower has fallen.
A dominating performance.
Yes.
The enemy's bottom barracks has fallen.
To hell with you.
Their bottom racks has been fired into the sun. We have mega creeps! We doomed!
Here's all you need.
They're unstoppable. Ownage.
Where's the fight? Verily.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen.
They're unstoppable. Ownage. A dominating performance. Onage.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen. Die große Mannen auf dem Campus.
Mega kill. Ownage.
Radiant
so it actually went up before going back down. Or for instance, if I wanted the cube to come up really fast and stop really quick, I could press G to grab and I can move this handle down and I can make it much sharper. So you can see now that is much sharper there, unlike this one where it slowly starts to get faster. This one stops immediately, and you can see that if I play that, the cube gets faster and faster, and then right there at the point of the next keyframe, it just stops instantly. So let me just show you an instance where this might be really useful. So I'm just going to delete the cube, and then I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a monkey head, and then let's also press Shift A, and I'm going to add a cube here, and I'm going to bring the cube over, so I'll just bring it over on the y-axis like this, and then I'm also going to scale the cube up, and I'm going to scale it up on the z-axis, and then I'll also scale it up on the x-axis, just like that. All right, so I'm now going to have the monkey head slam into the wall. So I'm going to select the monkey head right there, and then I'm going to go over, just drag this over to frame 1. So I need to add a keyframe here to tell the monkey head that's where it's going to start. So I'm actually going to turn on the auto key, and that way it'll just automatically add keyframes. So I'm going to just turn on the auto key by clicking on that button, and then to add a keyframe here, I can just press the G key to grab, and then I can just click to place it right there. So I'm not going to move it at all. And you can see that it's added those keyframes right there. So
AMD loses big for the first time in a while. Microsoft really please wants your breakfast. And one of the things that AMD is not enjoying is their numbers that they posted for Q1 of 2023, because their numbers have fallen by 65%, yielding the first loss for their numbers in quite so many quarters. So it's not terribly all bad news. They have seen a decrease in revenue about 9%. However, that's leading to their first $145 million loss, which is a decrease of 115% in profit year on year. This time last year, they were 16% profit. Now they are 3% loss on everything that's been going on. And a lot of that is because of their CPUs. Their revenue on CPUs is down to under $1 billion for the quarter, whereas this time last year, they were at $2.1 billion, which has also led to them losing 23% on that because they've had to drop the price. This is really no surprise if you've been paying attention to what AMD did with Ryzen 7000. Not a whole lot of people wanted to pick that up in Q4. A lot of people wanted to wait until the X3D chips actually came out, which they didn't release the one that everybody wanted until April, which is Q2, and then they started exploding. So we'll obviously have to wait and see what the numbers are going to look like when they get their Q2 earning report in about 3 months. But it's just very clear based on these numbers that Ryzen 7000 has been mostly just a non-starter for AMD when it comes to selling their CPUs. A lot of people wanted to stay on Ryzen 5000. They may have shot themselves in the foot by actually giving consumers so much value over the last few years that it's leading to some losses in this current quarter because people were just waiting for the X3D chips. If AMD had said, hey, we're not going to release those for a whole year, just like they did with the Ryzen 5000 series, the 5800 X3D didn't come out till way down the line. Maybe they would have sold a little bit better on Ryzen 7000, but they just created this weird environment where everybody knew what they wanted was coming and they were just gonna wait for it. And so they're down $692 million in income and gross margin for that reason. But it does look like on the gaming sector, when it comes to the console sales as well as the GPU sales, they're doing roughly all right. $1.8 billion versus $1.9 billion, which AMD is saying is because channel sell-through of the 6000 and 7000 series increased quarter on quarter, and that they had strong 7900 XTX sales. But additionally, we do know from Sony's numbers that the PlayStation 5 had its best quarter ever. It was the best-selling console in Q1 out of any console ever released. It had the most units sold, and that's what AMD includes here. So I don't think their GPUs are as strong as we think they are. I think if the consoles are probably selling a lot better than AMD's kind of giving here. You can see down here it says semi-custom revenue grew double-digit percentage year on year, more than offset by lower gaming graphics revenue. They are not likely doing very well in the GPU department, which is why they've had to lower prices on RX 6000. AMD, just like for the consumer side of things, not doing very well. GPU struggling, CPU struggling, and they expect that they're going to continue to struggle in Q2. They haven't really released anything super remarkable. The 7800 X3D is great. I do think that a lot of people are going to want to pick that up, but it might not be enough to actually bring their revenue up $1 billion. But AMD says that, hey, don't worry, because we care about AI. AI is very important to us, okay? NVIDIA may have gotten the jump because they saw AI coming, but now that it's here, AMD, we've got AI stuff coming too, saying that that's going to be their #1 strategic priority. Also reminding people that the MI300 world's first integrated data center APU is still coming. Honestly, I completely forgot about this thing because AMD hasn't talked about it very much, but saying that they are really excited about the AI opportunity. They think that it is successful for them to have a significant part in the AI overall opportunity. AI for us is broader than cloud. I mean, it also includes what we're doing in clients and embedded. So it looks like AMD is going to focus on AI. They've got the MI300 APU coming. They've got bad prospects when it comes to just being in the gaming PC sector overall, which is due to high prices. It's due to not really having a clear communication or marketing strategy with regards to their CPUs or even their GPUs. The 7900 XT was always a baffling launch. It didn't make a ton of sense. Obviously, the XTX is selling very well because it offers a ton of bang for buck compared to NVIDIA at the $1,000 price point. But we're left here as consumers wondering, when are we going to get anything affordable? Which we'll talk about in a second after we talk about the fact that Steam hardware survey has changed, because the last report that we got was that the 3060 increased a ton to be over 10% of the users on Steam. Turns out that was a fluke. The 1650 is back to being the most popular GPU. The 3060 should have never been at that top spot. AMD CPUs are still increasing compared to Intel's, but those are likely, if I had to guess, going to be the Ryzen 5000 series and not the 7000 series. And I can guess that this GPU is not going to be very popular in Steam hardware survey anytime soon. The 4060 Ti getting its first retail listing over at a Russian retailer, indicating that it's just as bad as we think it is. They have the specs, all of the pre-release specs of the palette cards that we've been hearing from, video cards and the like. It is just not as good. I went on a whole rant about it yesterday, 2 days ago. I went on a whole rant about it 2 days ago. Go check that video out in case you want to know what I think about the 4060 Ti. Spoiler, not good things. Another spoiler, Reese didn't give us deals yesterday. Is he gonna give us deals today?
Yo, welcome back to FT Deals, bringing the hottest tech.
Agreed. A chill wind. I'll bury you. Yes. To battle. Dead ahead. Truly. Forward. Denied. Yes. Going. Stopped cold. Does it tingle? Yes. Bone chilling. A chill wind. Frostbite. Forward. Truly. Yes. Cold front coming. Quickly. Adrift. Or flying going.
Dire's courier is dead.
Attack. Fight. Dead man drifting. Arms for the dead. I'm under attack. Truly. I am benumbed. A short repose. Biting cold. A gift from the tempest of battle. Forward.
Your middle tower is under attack.
Double damage.
My blood runs cold. Quickly. Agreed. Cold front coming. Feel the freeze. Going. Yes, I'm under attack.
Pardon the interruption, sir, but it's a phone call from your middle tower. It says it's being destroyed. Dire structures are fortified.
Wind.
Killing spree.
Yes. What's a little frost among friends?
Did not think.
Dead man drifting.
With an apple in your mouth.
Cold front coming. The frost spring. Don't make me chase you.
Radiant structures are fortified.
Man drifting.
Or just cut losses.
unseen?
Adrift.
Why, yes.
Yes.
That should help.
The enemy's top tower has fallen.
Yes. Look who's coming. Fresh meat.
Killing spree.
Lavender slaughter. Straight. This ice ain't nice. Cold cuts.
Dire structures are fortified.
Quickly. Agreed. Yes. Cold snap.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen. Your bottom tower
Let me go
is
first.
under
Let me
attack.
go first.
Drifting. Not yet. Adrift. I'm under attack. Quickly. Going. Stay frosty.
Hello, this is Gabe Newell. Killing Thanks for playing Dota 2. Impossible. Double kill.
Assault.
What's the opposite of regicide?
Your top tower is under attack.
Cold sun coming. A chill wind.
Pardon the interruption, sir, but it's a phone call from your middle tower. It says it's being destroyed.
Forward. Agreed. Froze your assets. Cool down. Truly.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Guys, you need to defend here.
Yes. Frost above. I'm on strike.
Killing spree.
Drifting.
Double kill.
Demise.
Frost keep us. Gonna have your mana.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Flashmate. Healing coming. Yes. Going.
Those sods! We got their bum tower. Rock on, Tommy!
Adrift. Frost Keeper.
Your top tower is under attack.
Forward. I'll keep an eye out. Truly.
Give me away.
Quickly. Yes. It's not time yet. A chill. Agreed. You will be looking up.
Double kill.
Storm Frost upon us. Quickly. Forward. Dead man drifting. A chill wind. Agreed.
Dire structures are fortified.
Cool down. Yes.
I'll take that.
But
Adrift. Yes. Cold front coming. Going. Truly. I'm not ready. Yes. I'm under attack. Cold front coming. Agreed. Once a little frost among friends. Lovely. A chill wind.
coming.
Boy, fresh mate. It's not time.
Dire's courier has been killed.
Truly.
Back, back, back.
Yes. drifting. Going. Frost keep us. Quickly. Adrift. Agreed.
Gotcha!
Quickly. Adrift. Frost upon us. Cold increases. Dead man drifting.
Invisibility.
Yes. Truly.
I'm very strong now, guys. Wait me, wait me, wait me.
Killing spree.
Snap.
Lazy come.
Your top tower is under attack. Remember that top tower you like so much?
Double kill.
You've come quite a figure. Biting cold. I'm under attack. Stay frosty. Chill. Melt for me. Flash me. Going. Frost keeper.
Your top tower is under attack.
Killing spree.
Cold front coming. Yes. Fresh meat.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Truly.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Do a sign service. To the realm. Sign your own death not yet. Cold
Bottom
front
tower is
coming.
under attack. Radiant's structures are fortified.
Winter.
You have learned nothing.
Return to the ground.
A brawl broke out today between Ukrainian and Russian diplomats at the
middle
PABSEC
tower is under
conference. It
attack.
started when a Russian diplomat ripped the Ukrainian flag out of the Ukrainian diplomat's hand. The Ukrainian diplomat then punched him out and put him in a chokehold before ripping the flag out of his hand. And in many ways, it's a perfect metaphor for Russia. Like most any bully, once you hit him back, you crumble to pieces. Follow to stay in the loop. A brawl broke out today between Ukrainian and Russian diplomats at the PABSEC conference. It started when a Russian diplomat ripped the Ukrainian flag out of a Ukrainian diplomat's hand. The Ukrainian diplomat then punched. I'm really like a...
Wind. Quickly. Wards. Frost upon
Tower is under attack. Oh man, this is totally harshing my mellow. What is so
Going.
Res. Go res, guys. Go res. Coming.
Killing spree.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Your bottom tower has fallen. Bro, do you even lift?
The time he reached the age of 48, he's professional bank robber. Wednesday, March 25th, 1960. A former professional bank robber who just returned to the city of Chicago after a 25-year stint in prison returned to his old ways, putting together a crew and taking down scores. But a Chicago detective, married to his profession, would soon become all-consumed by the pursuit of the robber and his crew, leading to one of the deadliest law enforcement shootouts in Chicago history, and the inspiration for the iconic movie. This is the true story behind the film.
Back. Back.
Stay frosty. Yes. Dead man
Go res, guys.
Are fortified.
Frost keepers. Adrift. A chill wind.
The enemy's top tower has fallen. If it was me, I need a new pair of pants.
What's a little frost among friends?
Oh, guys, go hell.
Your middle tower has been denied. Are you serious?
Truly. Fresh myth,
Own it. Killing spree. Double kill.
Chill wind. Frost upon us.
Dominating, I guess.
I'm under attack. A penetrating cold.
Your bottom
Truly.
tower is under attack.
Frost upon us. Dead man drifting. Temperature dropping. Yes. Agreed. Yes. Cold front coming. Going. Frost keepers. Forward.
take that.
The cold black pool rejects me. Dead man drifting. Bloody crepes. Yes. Yes. Adrift. A chill wind. What's a little frost among friends? Forward. Agreed. I'll bury you. Truly.
Killing spree. Double kill.
Stay frosty. Quickly. Temperature.
Dominating, I guess.
Oh my!
Excuse me, sir, but it's your top tower. Your top tower has fallen. They killed your courier! They killed your courier!
Like winter, I return. Going. Frost keep us. Dead man drifting.
Oh, smoke maybe. Yep, go. They spread it.
Frost upon us. Agreed. Adrift. Almost there. Stay
Back.
frosty. I'm not ready to
Double kill. Killing spree. Impossible.
Lotus nih bro, Lotus.
Quickly. Forward. Don't make me chase you.
Dire structures are fortified.
Yes.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen.
Onage. Double kill.
Yes. Feel frost keep us.
Back.
Froze your assets. Quickly! Cold front coming. Yes.
Go take this.
A chill wind.
DD here, DD.
That should help.
Take DD, take DD.
Adrift. Put this soul to use. Yes.
Flight. Ina.
Almost there. Forward.
Bulo ka sa gago eh.
Greed.
Ogre oh.
Go rest, guys. Gonna rest.
Stay frosty. It's not time.
Killing spree.
Come on, get out of here.
Not yet. Dead man drifting. A donation.
Rest.
Adrift. Bone chilling. Little frost
Put
among
words.
friends. Quickly, melt for me.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Radiant structures are fortified.
To battle.
interruption, sir, but it's a phone call from your middle tower. It says it's being destroyed.
From frozen waters, I rise.
Wait me, wait me, wait.
Trust me! Truly. Once a little frost among friends. Going. Agreed. Frost upon us.
Bro, please push. He's dead.
Cold front coming. Yeah, you do.
Get back, mid.
Dire structures are fortified.
Dead man drifting. I'm under cross. Come
fortified.
Go, go.
More scouting.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
Fresh meat.
No BKB, no BKB.
Middle tower, take it off your Christmas card list. It's gone!
Yes.
Your middle tower is under attack.
Frost
hey,
upon
forget
us.
about it.
Yes.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
What's a little frost among friends? Cold front coming. Come to Lich.
Back.
Killing spree.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Hey, you guys doing some great work. Forget about it. Your bottom tower is under attack. Bottom tower go bye-bye. Radiant structures are fortified.
Stay frosty. Temperature. So no one does this to me. Stand your coin. Breathe quickly. Going. Frost keep us.
Take outpost. Fudge. Here.
A minor setback.
Oh, that's
Dead man drifting. Truly.
Okay.
The enemy's middle barracks has fallen. Are you serious?
Go. No ulti MK.
Back.
My cold
Go top. No buyback si aim.
adrift.
Buyback, skip buybacks.
Hey, that top tower's on bone.
Killing spree.
Wind. Dead man drifting. Fight. Yes. Going. What's a little frost among friends? Quickly.
Back, guys, back. Let's back.
Forward.
Fudge, get Jin Fudge.
Roche, maybe they're doing Roche. Trident did Roche.
Yes. Going.
Vision, we need vision.
Yes. Truly. Frost upon us.
Dominating, I guess.
Bro.
Dead man drifting.
Bro.
Agreed. Yes.
Then kill the courier. Your courier is dead.
Frost keep us. Quickly. Forward.
Kukugre, bro.
Don't make me chase you, bitch.
Get out, circle, bro. Get back, get back, get back.
I'm under attack. I am not alone.
Double kill.
Donation. Does it tingle? The frost spreads. Frost keep us.
That bottom tower is under attack.
Almost there.
Killing spree. Ownage.
Go, go, go. Otro.
No buyback.
Dead man drifting. That's more like it.
So only. Just support.
Dire structures are fortified.
Oh, the lost glyph, the lost glyph.
A chill wind. Yes.
Dominating, I guess. Onage.
Cold front coming.
The enemy's middle tower has fallen. This is really remarkable, Steve.
Agreed.